All right. Hey, what's up? Welcome to the WeddingPros podcast. Super excited. We got a special guest today. But before we get into that, I just want to remind you to subscribe, hit the button on YouTube. Of course, we're on Apple and Spotify and a number of other podcasting platforms. So definitely check us out. Give us a subscribe. Super, super helpful to do that. So today we got a special guest. We got Benj Haisch. Did I say that right, Benj?
Hello. That is correct.
Great,
yeah.
So Benj and I had the opportunity to work together in like September out in San Francisco.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. Did I annoy you too much? Was I out of the way? How did I do?
No, man, it was great.
Yeah, good. And then you probably don't even remember meeting Jared, but you guys ran into each other at workshop in Brooklyn.
Yes, sir. Yep. Benj was a super nice dude, was just going around eating tacos and saying hi to everybody. And I was like, oh, man, that guy's really nice. I bet he does a lot of weddings. And then it was like, oh, Benj is a speaker. And then he's also super duper famous. And everyone in the world knows Benj. And just like, yeah, I was like, this guy's awesome. Why? Like, I don't know. We talk about it all the time. We're like, people in the industry that are most successful, it always seems like they're just like the nicest people in the world. And I don't know.
I'm sure we've all met a few duds, but I think in general that rings true.
Totally.
Yeah.
So Benj, let's just we all love making images, right? I don't think I like making images as much as you like making images. Like you shoot, it seems like you shoot photos like every day.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, I have 3 point and shoot film cameras on my desk right now. I have this is an underwater camera that looks like a toy, but I just got the first scans back from it and it's amazing. Got that. This is like another camera I carry almost every day. It has like a Zeiss lens on it. And then I got this one recently, and it's like my new favorite camera. But they're all small little film cameras that, pretty much wherever I go, whatever I do, I always have at least one camera on me.
How did you decide?
I love photography.
How did you decide that like the little point and shoot camera was gonna be your voice, at least like the daily kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, it would be harder for you guys, obviously, because video gear is just so much bigger. I'm a photographer, by the way, in case anybody didn't know that part about it. I'm going to open this cabinet up right here, but if I had to carry around like a camera like this big all day, every day, like that just wouldn't work very well. So for those listening at home, I'm holding like a Hasselblad or any basically, regular DSLR camera. They're just so big and cumbersome and isn't conducive to actually, using on a daily basis. So these little guys are like a little bit bigger or even smaller in some regards than my phone. So most of my point and shoots are a little bit thicker, obviously, because they have to be as thick as a roll of film, but they're smaller in the footprint otherwise than my phone is. And so, I just love carrying them around, and I love the process specifically of shooting film too, because then I'm not worried about editing it. It's a completely separate process from my work process.
Totally.
So I'm not worried about importing the photos later and editing them and all that stuff. I just mail a bunch of rolls of film out to a lab and.
Well, you basically removed all the barriers that most of us have to creating work, which is like when I think about, if I think about shooting video, I immediately think about editing video.
Yeah.
And then I go, totally. I don't want to edit video.
I can't tell you how many photos I have from traveling, and I'm like, I still have to edit those from like 2 years ago. And it's just like, I'll get around to it eventually.
You won't.
Maybe, but probably not.
Your backlog going, because it's funny, we all love shooting photos. Mm-hmm. And we all love having photos, but I don't know, there's probably some masochist out there that loves editing photos. And there are times where I guess I love editing.
Did you incorporate film just from the moment you started doing photography, Benj? Was it like something that you were passionate about, or did you start with digital and, what did that kind of look like?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so still the majority of my professional work, and especially because I'm a wedding photographer, and so I take, upwards of like 100,000 photos a year, and still like that majority is all digital.
Yep.
but I started like that Hasselblad I showed was my uncle's. My dad, I have like my dad's Nikon F2 from the 70s. So those cameras I just kind of grew up knowing about, and it was sort of a part of, I guess, like my family's visual history and legacy and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I always liked that. And then I only took one photography class in college, and it was like a black and white, dark room, old school film class like that. And so I did some of that kind of stuff, developed my own film and did my own prints in the darkroom and stuff like that. But I also started taking photos in 2007. So that was right kind of when film was really taking its big nosedive and digital was really on the ascent to something that was completely viable as a professional. But yeah, I've always just kind of loved the look and the feel and the process of shooting film. And so I think that's a big part of it. It's a completely separate process in terms of how you go about shooting and how you go about getting those images back and that whole thing. So
I love vintage cameras. Like I think of it like this last year I started getting into like watches, and I haven't made the plunge into like vintage watches yet, but I'm like kind of weeding it out, and the whole like legacy of like family and like handing down. And I think it's the same with cameras. Like I have a good like Canon AE one from my dad, and then my grandfather's passed down like an old Minolta too. So I have all these cameras that like I like to shoot, but they're hand-me-downs too. So it almost like adds to the authenticity of it's the images that I'm trying to take.
Everything that has to do with like an heirloom, right? I mean, that's really what we do for work. We're making heirlooms.
Oh, totally.
It's funny when like people, I'm not a very nostalgic person.
Yeah.
Like
I'm totally opposite. Yeah.
No, I'm not nostalgic. Like I'm like, if I could have nothing in my house that I didn't use, I would be happy.
Oh man, I'm like the exact opposite.
but like there is this old guitar that we have in our family, like a 1965 acoustic Gibson, which is not in good shape.
That's awesome.
But we love
fixed.
It. It's art in like little things. Like there's always like this little thing of like something that gives you a meaningful memory of a person, a place, an experience. Like,
Yeah.
And I do feel like a lot of people like are negative about phones, for instance. But I look at it and I'm like, for me, it's really set me free. Because I'm not a person who wants to be encumbered by a bunch of cameras and a bunch of clutter in my house and a bunch of things. But I actually do value, and it's made me shoot more. And it's made me capture more memories. So it's interesting because really what we kind of did there is we talked about doing a thing because of how it made us feel.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
How's it make you feel when you're actually shooting?
Yeah.
Totally.
And so that's cool. So we were talking on the phone and just talking about maybe what we would end up discussing today. And I kind of asked you the question, which was like, how did you go from being a successful wedding video or photographer? Actually, you told me you did do a little video. You started out.
I did.
Is there proof of that somewhere on the
Bad news.
the World Wide Web?
Oh, definitely not. I hope not.
But you went from being, I think, a successful photographer who did really well, which you used to blog like an insane amount. Like you were.
That was the thing, man. It used to be really, I mean, it's still important, but yeah, it used to be the main sort of form of social media and all that stuff.
Yeah. So you were doing this and doing this and doing this, and a lot of other people were. And then you did a wedding in like 2013, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. What was that couple's name?
Yeah, so I'm assuming you're referring to Nick and Laura, who got married. They did like the first like true adventure elopement.
Yeah,
where it was just the two of them on a mountain kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what it was.
That's so funny because Jay mentioned that, and he was like, "Yeah, this is like we're talking the other day," and he mentioned this, and I was like, "Oh, what was that?" And I was like, I definitely remember seeing that right around that time and being like, because it was actually on the video side. I remembered the video from it.
Yeah. The video was insane.
Video was blew up as well.
Who made that video again?
I can't tell you. Yeah. Well, you probably can.
I could tell you. Yeah. His name's Jansen Powers.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That's right.
I don't think he does video for wedding stuff anymore, but he's an amazing videographer based in Brooklyn now, and his stuff's amazing.
Yeah.
So that wedding blew up. And
Yeah.
and so tell me a little bit about that, because like my question is always like, when you're making something, I feel like you don't always know what you're making. Were you like making this film and you're like, this is gonna blow up?
Yeah, I mean, so a little bit like of my backstory and stuff like that. I mean, I'm like wearing a North Face jacket.
Yep.
I live in the Pacific Northwest. Like I grew up camping and being on a lake and being in the mountains. I was like, my mom would like pick us up from school in the afternoon and we'd go snowboarding. Like we were always just kind of like out camping and doing that kind of thing all summer long, right? And then what would happen is I became a wedding photographer, and then all of my friends and family and all those camping trips that we used to go on, I wouldn't be able to go on anymore because I was shooting some wedding in downtown Seattle, or somewhere else. But they were just normal weddings in terms of planning and locations and just things you would think of as like a typical wedding. And so I was realizing more and more that all the things that I was doing on a weekend now were so different from what the rest of my life had been growing up in terms of weekends and stuff. And then I kind of started thinking, man, I bet there are other people that like wouldn't necessarily always want to do the ballroom wedding thing. And so I started pushing my clients a little bit before that too, to like, maybe instead of like doing the photos at this golf course, maybe we can do the photos at this cliff that overlooks the ocean instead, and stuff like that, and started pushing in that way. And then a friend of mine who knew that couple, Nick and Laura, was their officiant, and kind of pitched me to them and them to me, vice versa. And I just told them, oh my gosh, yes, what you guys are doing is exactly what I've been wanting to do as well. And I just remember telling them, like, whatever you can pay me, like, let's just do it, because that's the thing that I want to do as well. And I felt like if I could make those things line up for me, and those people who they were, like Nick was like an X Games like medalist for snowboarding, and Laura at the time had like 150,000 Instagram followers. And so you just kind of knew that like all those things were setting up in a way that it made sense to do kind of at all costs. And so, they paid me probably like a third of my normal rate for all that stuff. But I was just like, nope, I'm going to do it. And hopefully this goes as well as, I'm hoping it will.
At the very least, you're putting out into the world the type of client you want to get and the type of work you want to do.
Yeah, and exactly the kind of thing I want to do more of. And so 100% it was going to be worth that gamble, at least to have that stuff in the portfolio. If it resonated with people, cool. Like, that's awesome. That's the goal. But even if it didn't resonate with people, that's like the thing that I wanted to do more of anyway. And so hopefully it would grab a couple people. But yeah, it went from hopefully it'll grab a couple people to being like one of the most, if not the most popular wedding that entire year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was like, I think it was the most pinned wedding of the year on Pinterest.
Yeah, and it was like the most
Pinterest.
It was the most popular wedding on Green Wedding Shoes, that wedding blog. That especially then was like, for anybody that wasn't trying to do a traditional wedding, was like top of the game for sure.
So now that kind of adventure wedding, elopement, which thing is relative. I wouldn't say it's popular yet, like, because we get a lot of inquiries and barely any of them for elopements. And it's not just because we don't, and we live in New England too, so it's very cold.
Yeah, it's definitely a little different.
But at the same time, I think it's popular, and what I do know is maybe every couple doesn't aspire to do that, but every photographer aspires to do it. Like, it seems like.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's definitely different too out west, just because we have so much more of that sort of like natural landscape and big national parks and everything like that. And so out here, it's like crazy popular.
Totally. A lot more cutting edge than Boston, who wins like the least stylish and least thoughtful, like
GQ. We went least stylish city every year
of all time.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man,
completely.
Well, my condolences.
Yeah, everybody's wearing a hoodie. Everybody's wearing a hoodie. The whole city's wearing a hoodie.
But it provides opportunity at the same time, because if
oh, for sure,
if we're the only people kind of pushing a certain type of product, then people are going to gravitate towards it automatically. So it's a little bit.
Well, that's really where I was headed anyway, which is like, there's this concept of being on the bleeding edge, right? Where what's funny is I went back, and your photos are amazing and always amazing. So I went back and looked and like at some of the work that was pushed the industry forward. Right? Because of it was something innovative, like, oh, we're going to do smoke, or we're going to do, whatever it is. And like some of it's not that good. It's fine. It's not terrible, but it made a huge mark because you're on the edge. And I don't really know how to tell someone, like if they were like, how do I be on the bleeding edge of something and be on the front of the next big trend? It's like, I don't know. I wouldn't give anyone advice on doing that. But I think you kind of hit on something, which is one of the things that you can do is you can lean into your instincts and just do what you want to do. And who knows?
Totally.
Maybe other people will be into it. Like, because like you said, you thought, oh, I'm going to get more of these couples. I'm sure you didn't think this is going to grow my Instagram following by like 140,000 people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like my whole thing too, and I guess we'll probably end up dovetailing into this at some point though, is I think the thing about that being successful for me is because it was something I already wanted to do. It wasn't me trying to be like some sort of trendsetter, or I wasn't trying to like create a new niche in the industry. Yep. It was just something that like this would be more of a natural thing for me to do than what I'm currently doing. So I'm going to kind of like explore that realm a little bit more,
Well, that's how you're going to create authentic work, right? That's actually going to be sustainable for you.
Yeah. So it's 2020 Benj, things have changed a lot since then. Would you say you're kind of able to be a little bit more, I would assume a lot more choosy about the type of couples that you're working with now, and you're able to do a lot more of the work that you're trying to do in general?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I could talk for an hour about that specifically, but my rule of thumb too is that I've actually never turned down a couple.
No kidding.
For their style or anything like that. Yeah. I've never said like, hey, we're not going to work together. What I've always done is just made very, very clear like who I am, how I approach things, what I do, what I value, what their overall outcome is going to be like. And if their values and what they're looking for out of their photos also lines up with that really well, then like, cool, we're going to be a good fit. And it doesn't necessarily matter where that thing is going to be. It doesn't have to be on a mountaintop. It doesn't have to be wherever, as long as like our visions for the rest of the stuff that like actually matters lines up.
Totally.
There's a lot of other things and qualifications with that, and then with budgets and stuff like that sort of like are natural disqualifiers. But I think that's another thing is just people often will just go like, okay, this is my ideal client. I'm not booking anybody else but my ideal client. And then they turn down a bunch of work and a bunch of people who would be genuinely amazing for their business at the detriment of their own reputation almost, because they're going like, oh yeah, I was thinking about hiring this guy to do this thing, but he said I wasn't cool enough, or my style wasn't cool enough.
I'm an adventure photographer. I only would ever do adventure.
We talk about that a lot, the ideal client, and it seems like that's been like a really like trendy thing. They talk about it a lot at workshops, and to a certain extent, I probably believe it. Like they obviously the natural disqualifiers and whatever price point, overall vision and ideals. But the whole like, well, they aren't up my alley. I think that's translated a lot into what you said. Like,
I think
they're
it's
not my
been
style or whatever. And it's like, it's not really.
It's kind of been like an insidious kind of movement based on something good.
Oh yeah.
It really turns me off, to be honest, because I'm like, first, I'm an entrepreneur, right? And I'm like, so you're so successful that you can turn down your entire lead funnel. Like, give me a break. Nobody's that successful. Eventually, it'll taper off for anybody. You're not living off 2013. You're living off 2019. Like Benj,
Oh, for sure.
And so Benj is the same as any of us. Like, and I think at the end of the day, like, I just think people are important. People matter. Like, people aren't tools for your career. It's their wedding day.
Totally.
Like, it's just ridiculous. And so for like, what's funny, like Caitlin and Steve, that was not an adventure wedding. Like, we had no space even to do portraits, We barely even had time to do portraits. It was wonderful experience. The couple was amazing.
Yeah, it was great.
I was happy with the work that I got out of it. And it looked like your stuff was great too. And then of course it was more challenging in a different way. So I enjoyed that because it was like, oh, this was a little challenging and this was a little challenging. And how do I continue to be professional in my non-ideal workspace? And I feel like if you only work with doing the same thing, this is what I think people don't realize. Doing the exact same thing with the exact same type of people will make your work boring to you. Like,
yeah, I can see. I mean, that's one of the reasons I love wedding photography specifically, is just because you have to do every different type. I have to be good at product photography. I have to be great at portraiture. I have to be great at photojournalism. I have to think on my feet and be able to set up portraits in 5 minutes in bad lighting, and you're dealing with different people every single weekend. It's not like I'm just, flipping burgers or doing an assembly line thing. Even if you did the same wedding or another wedding at the same venue or something like that, it's still going to be different. But
oh yeah, that's why it's funny. I don't know. Do you still get this? Have you ever shot that venue before? Question? Or are you out of that question?
Every once in a while, especially it's more like, hey, I just got one. This is going to sound pretentious or whatever, but I just got one for Patagonia the other day, and I was like, oh yeah, and they're like, have you ever been to Patagonia? I was like, no, but I've been to, and I got to list all these other places that were really similar to Patagonia.
I've been to a mountain before.
Yeah, I live right next to mountains. There's lots of stuff.
Are you worried?
But yeah,
I
mean,
climb
I get that.
the mountain? Are you worried that?
Yeah,
I've watched Emperor's New Groove. Yeah.
I often just tell people though that unless your wedding's underwater, I've probably shot and taken photos in a really similar location.
Well, but not
before.
only that,
Now you have the camera, the underwater camera.
You have that underwater camera.
I do. I could shoot it on this tiny little point and shoot.
Let them know.
This thing was $30 and it was actually awesome. I just got the scans back.
I can only do your wedding underwater with this camera.
Yeah, a 32 millimeter. It might flash, but who knows?
But the point being is you can shoot the same environment, but the people are what makes it unique and different. Of course, the environment can too, and the weather and whatever. But there's just so many challenges, and I don't think it benefits a person to try to lock themselves into one. I do think price range is great. I think lock yourself into a price range by all means. Fine, you got to do what you got to do and demand and all that stuff, and I'm all about that. But I think I don't like thinking about my clients as a mechanism from their people and it's weddings. So the human part of what we do, I think is I think it's the most special part, and it's the part that I think
absolutely
that we can get pretty caught up in. So do you think a lot of wedding photographers maybe kind of lose track of that sometimes?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the hard part is in terms of feedback and stuff like that, we have social media now. We have all these different outlets that are constantly providing us with feedback. And oftentimes I'm only going to hear back maybe once or twice from each client about what things were important to them, what things they really enjoyed about the work that I produced for them. But I might post that same work or parts of that same work on social media 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. And I will be getting feedback from other people who weren't those clients who are only seeing the highlight of that particular thing. And then we, as photographers, and I think there's probably this for video as well, there's, awards and there's different ways that you can get accolades for that work. And so I find that if you're not careful, you can turn your clients into the product that you're putting out, and them being less of a person and more of a product or a portfolio builder for you to build your empire or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I find that, that's a huge issue because, sometimes your motives for making good work might not be aligning with what the client wants, depending on if you're communicating right and what those client expectations are for you. And I'm sure we all fall into that at some point. We're going to put something in our film or we're going to make a photo that you're just going to go, this is really cool. The client will hopefully like it because they like your style, but it might not be necessarily 100% for them, right?
Well, I was working on a wedding the other day and I was I found myself disappointed a little bit with it, and it just didn't look the way I was hoping it would look, and it's nothing to do with the actual quality of the people.
Anything they would ever notice in a million years.
No, they would never care, and they would actually probably not like what I liked. They would like it exactly how they did it. That's what they liked, and
oh, totally.
And that's what it is. And in the moment, I was watching and she was saying something because we have the benefit of feedback from the audio.
Yeah.
And she said
Totally.
something, and I was like, "Oh wait, this is really special. Like this is a really special thing." And I think it really hits you every once in a while that it isn't about you. You know?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like, I mean, my whole thing is like, I have like the goal, and you guys have the goal too, of like creating the visual history for these people, right? Like you are, like you said earlier, you called your work and stuff like that heirlooms. We're creating heirlooms for people. And I find that like I've been married 10 years now, and the longer I go, the less those actual visual memories that I had with my own eyes are my memories. My stuff is now tied more and more every probably day that goes by to the photographs and stuff like that were at my wedding. And especially if, I didn't have a video, but if I had a video, all those memories were going to be tied to those moments in video and in photo. And so we have all that kind of stuff to be those like sort of eyes and ears and become the memory for those people. And I often like tell myself, like if I see photographers doing this all the time, they'll post a photo that's like really, really cool. And as far as like, aesthetically, and I can tell like the lens was cool and like the bokeh is right and the lens flare is coming in perfectly and all this stuff. It's all aligned as a photo really good. And then I see photographers being like, oh my gosh, but they made this other photo that someone took on a phone as their profile picture. And I'm like, well, yeah, because the photo you took of them is really, really cool and really, really technically amazing, but it just wasn't flattering. And there was no emotion, no anything connected to that.
Well, and that's honestly
other than your technical greatness,
The client doesn't care about you, probably. Very few. Some of them do, but in general, they
do, yeah.
But not all of them.
Not in terms of like.
It's
yeah,
and it's like I gotta
always.
be kind of okay with that. Like that's not my goal. It's to make them like view me as some celebrity who is a big deal to them, or even if they're not my friend, even if we have a good working relationship. My goal is to give them photos that make them remember why they got married or think of a great day in their life.
Yeah. Absolutely. For me, it's always like people over portfolio. Mm-hmm. So, if I can go into it going like, here are my preconceived things that I want to accomplish here, but if any of those personally for me end up superseding what would be best for my client, then those get overridden immediately, right?
You remember Caitlin and Steve, Steve's dad had some disabilities. And they asked me for certain things in that video. I'm sure they asked you for certain things. And that was the most important images.
Yeah.
Not the ones with the most technical skill. We could, of course, do those technically skilled, do the best we can with those images. But that was important to her that she got that memory from that day.
Yeah.
And that's not the thing I'm going to release on Instagram, but it's the thing that is going to make her want to go, that was an amazing experience working with them.
Something that Jay mentioned when he came back from California after working with you was, I was like, he came back and I was like, how was Benj working with him? What was different about it?
I was like, jerk. He was so mean.
Yeah. He was like classic.
The worst.
He was like only blue M&Ms.
Yeah. In the green room.
Have that in my rider.
Yeah. I wanted to sit at the head table next to the bride and groom. Yeah.
It's where the best shots are, man.
Yeah. Hey, that's right. You can shoot from the hip, literally.
Oh my gosh. Literally. Yikes.
But he was like, we did this the session, the guys were like, we should do the shot at this boardroom that we're getting ready. Like we're like a Donald Trump, boardroom. We're all
they were a rowdy bunch.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah. And he was like, and Benj was just like, all right, guys, let's do it. And I was like, oh, that's not really like Benj's style. And it's just funny because I think a lot of times I've worked with photographers a lot where it's like, they won't even come close to that. They're like, F that crap. I don't do that. And I've heard it said to the bride and groom, and I'm like, oh man. And to hear someone who does as much work as you do and has the, reputation that you do, I was like, oh, that's really cool that he was just like, go with the flow. And it's not about an ego trip at the end of the day, no matter how many Instagram followers you might have or whatever. It's just like, make the client happy. Bring good vibes to the day, and I was like, oh yeah, that seems right up Benj's alley. Like you would be the one that would. Be all about that life.
I got a 6 shot of that boardroom scene. I don't know about you, but
Yeah. Dude, I mean, I got good shots. It's not something that's the thing is like, I think that anytime that you just like even surprise people, because I have it all the time where some bridesmaid will like, suggest something that I'm like, oh my gosh, there's in my brain, just going like, there is no way that is like, I'm just thinking internally, this is a bad idea. This is not going to look good, whatever. And then I'll also often see like my client, like the bride or the groom or whoever it is, kind of going like, or they'll try to shut that person down.
no, he's Benj. He's an expert.
My goal,
Don't talk
even
to
if,
him.
yeah, even if, well, I think it's just like, no, he doesn't do that. But my thing is like, if I can just make like positive deposits like that all day long by just, if someone suggests doing something, even if I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not going to work, I'm like, yeah, totally, let's do it,
Yeah.
And then that usually just changes the mood and the atmosphere of everything. Because if you're just like agreeing and being positive, what's it going to take you like 2 minutes?
Totally.
Like to do something, even if you think it's like the worst idea in the world.
Yep.
Like in my mind, I'm praying that like they're never going to show that photo, or not that one, the border one, but other like ideas
Certain
that I've not
photos.
Even worse, that it
liked
blows
or whatever,
up on
aesthetically
Instagram.
or whatever.
You start getting asked
But,
if you can do that shot at every wedding by all your clients.
Yeah.
Can you do the
No,
one where
I've had
leaning
similar
over,
things.
making cute faces?
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing about that is then like I'm not going to have, if I have a bad interaction with someone early in the day because I've shut their idea down or whatever, that's just going to screw up every other interaction I have with that person.
Totally.
And so if I can just go into it going like, oh yeah, totally, let's do this. It's not going to take me any time. It's not going to really matter in that overall thing, but it's going to put a positive, like this guy's game to do whatever we need to do impression on everyone's mind. You know what I mean?
If they like you when they're sober, they'll love you when they're drunk.
Yeah.
Sometimes
That's the goal.
it can challenge you too. I think like I had a wedding this summer and it was a tent wedding, tent reception, and out in this field they had made this like
The venue did.
the venue made a shape of a hearts with like candles like on this like hill in the distance, and both moms at like 9 o'clock at night, it's pitch black out, and they came up, they're like, it'd be great to have a photo of the bride and groom, with that in the background. And I'm like, I'm gonna have to like direct flash them, like this is not gonna be good news. But I was like, well, it's a challenge, right? It's like, it's not really my cup of tea. Maybe it's not up my alley as far as style goes, but you know what? I usually don't use flash that way. Let's give it a whirl, see how it works. And if they like it, great. Yeah, I can make them happy. And like you said, I like that positive deposits with the bride and groom, with the family. Because at the end of the day, that's the thing that's going to get you work.
Obviously, we have different like trajectories is what you do and what we do with our companies. But I do think at the core, and with a lot of people, a lot of different styles of photography and art that gets made and business models and all these things. But I do see a common thread. If you're wondering like, how do I be successful? I could be like, I don't know, 20 different ways you can be successful as an artist. The one thing I would say that is a common thread is treating people the right way. We talk about that a lot on our podcast, but how it manifests is probably pretty similar to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot of just because I've been doing this, I think it's 13 years now, which is a really, really long time for photographers. So when I'm speaking at events and stuff like that, when there's a Q&A thing, often that is like a topic that gets brought up is like, hey, what's like your key to longevity or whatever? And there's a lot of ways
really
about
old.
it. But I feel super old. Yeah, always. But the thing is, like, I think that I've seen a lot of people like be a trendsetter or do something and then just get really hot and really big for a year or two, a couple of years, really successful, and then they just kind of fall off and then they disappear. And a lot of that I find is because, not every case, but I think a big key to my longevity is just going like, no, I'm just going to like plug along, do what I want to do, try to treat people the right way, try to make my portfolio and everything like that about what is best for my client. And the more I can do the best for my client in those moments, the more I'm going to get positive interactions with them. Their photos are going to look more natural. All those things are going to work towards me having a great portfolio. And there's times where I could have made better photos technically or portfolio-wise or for social media or whatever at the at the expense of my photographer or my clients, but at the end of the day, it was more worthwhile for me to keep those positive things going. And keep those interactions. Most of the time, all of my referrals and stuff like that are going to be from the wedding party, the immediate family, those clients. And so if I'm interacting with them well during the day, they're already going to have a really positive view of me before they even see the photographs.
Yep.
And then hopefully those photographs are just going to be like the icing on the cake, the cherry on top, all that stuff to the interactions and stuff like that they had with me when it was going on, right?
Yep. Well, it's how it, if food looks good, it tastes good. And I think if you had a good experience with someone, it looks better to you. Like that couple's going to look at that photo and think of, that was a lot of fun taking those shots, and not, he was like, that was horrible. I actually wanted to punch him. Yeah. Who knows?
I think it's interesting, Ben, you mentioned, still at the end of the day, after having, hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram, it's still for you, your referrals are coming from friends and family and kind of that bunch. I think a lot of people will be like, well, if I can grow my Instagram following to this amount, then I can just do really whatever the heck I want. I think that's kind of like a false narrative that a lot of photographers, succumb to. I mean, I think about it a lot. I'm like, if we just grow our social, then we can just do the work that we want to do. We can, act the way we want on on the wedding day itself, and just kind of like can do whatever we want. But to think like, no, it's still about experience, and that's really the key to longevity. I think that's an important point made.
Yeah, and from just wisdom. Like a simple, thank you. But yeah, from a simple business perspective too, like I don't ever want all of my referrals to be coming from one particular thing, unless that is only referrals from like past clients, because that is going to be, hopefully for anybody, their bread and butter. They're going to be getting positive referrals from people who actually worked with me. And if I put all my eggs into the Instagram basket, or all of it into one particular form of advertising, if that thing goes away or becomes not popular anymore, you might be toast.
Yep.
So,
well, they always say in just general marketing, it's 50-50. You want 50% referrals, 50% marketing leads. However you want to do that with your marketing, whatever works best for you, but you can't just, some people brag about it. Like, I only have referrals. And I'm like, okay, what about when all your friends become that group of friends all gets old and they're all married, and then you need new leads.
Yeah.
But also you better be getting referrals. So let's move it to our side, the creative community side, to kind of close this out. So one of the things I'm always fascinated by is people who create streams of revenue that are not necessarily passive. Some of them are passive, but some of them are they're just not weddings. They're different streams of revenue, whether it be education, selling presets, things that are for our community. Kind of that's a big part of your personal business now, right?
Sure. Yeah, totally.
So like this, I think, is like the big, like this is the adventure photography of now. Is everyone wants to be, I think almost every creative I've spoken to at some point in the conversation, when you say, what's your plan? They say, I want to move into education. I want to move into presets. And so people are interested in it for good reason, because they're looking at their knees and their backs and they're going, I can't keep doing this forever.
Sure.
For you, how did that come about? This part of your life that I'm sure maybe at one point you had no idea you were ever going to get into.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with speaking and teaching and stuff like that. Like, it was never something that I really wanted to do. And I always felt like, I grew up in church, and I was like on staff at a church for a while. And so I had all these people around me who were really talented presenters, because that's what they wanted to do. And I was just the media, music, photo, whatever guy that didn't want to do all that stuff. So I kind of always knocked myself down in those terms. And so I didn't feel qualified to do it specifically. And I kept being asked actually to speak at events, because I've always been really engaged in the community and really a big part of the photo community and stuff like that in general. But I kept turning them down, because I was just like, no, it's not my thing. Like, I don't really want to do it. Because at the time, I guess this is probably maybe the opposite for a lot of people. But it was just like conferences and events that weren't nearly as big as they are now in terms of the industry and stuff like that. But I finally felt like someone offered to have me speak at their events, and I was just thinking like, okay, I should do this. It's out of my comfort zone, but I'm only going to do it if I find something that I really, really am passionate about presenting and really feel like A is going to be good value and B is going to be something really unique that I don't hear other people talking about, right? And so that's kind of how I fell into it. I ended up speaking on kind of a lot of the stuff we've been talking about today, actually, about like just treating people right, not doing it for your own accolades or whatever, and just kind of the whys behind like why I do photography specifically. Did that, and then someone was at that event and saw me and invited me to speak at their other event and all that stuff. But my main thing with all that too is I've never been someone to just, as soon as there is an opportunity, to just like jump into it full on and make it like a big part of who I am. I want to make sure that like what I'm doing is authentic to me. I'm not doing it in haste or whatever. I probably am too reserved in those standpoints because, like I said, I turned down a lot of other speaking engagements and stuff like that before I finally did my first one. But it's just really important to me to make sure that I'm like prepared and ready, and because I really value what my reputation is online and in the community and stuff like that. And so I just knew that if I was just going out there and just throwing random stuff out into the world that I wasn't educated on or didn't provide value to people, that it wasn't, going to be worth it in that way.
So you also, I don't know how much of your revenue or any of your personal priorities or time or anything when it comes to the presets, but you sell presets as well. Are they on your website or do you have a separate marketplace that you sell them on?
Yeah. So I sell it through a separate marketplace so that I don't have to do all the back end and customer service. And
which one is
all
it?
that good
again?
stuff.
I thought it was.
So my presets are called Cascade Presets, and they are sold through Meridian Presets.
That's what it is.
So they have like a marketplace of 10 or so other people that also sell their presets through there.
Yep. So that's kind of like, I would say like having Meridian presets and having like, that's a lot of people. That's their aspiration, I think. And I think it's cool.
Sure.
Like go for whatever you want to go for. But you were telling me the other day, you was like, took you 5 years to make a preset of requests.
Well, yeah. So like I said, with anything I'm doing, I had slowly developed different presets of my own through all that stuff. And then when I realized that the demand was just so high that people were I would get multiple messages a day of like, what preset do you use? And then I would tell them which one from another company I'd use, but I had tweaked it so much that like I was just like, it's beyond recognition. I realized that the demand was so high for me to make my own and people wanted my look so much that I deleted every preset that I had out of my Lightroom catalog and off my computer and everything like that, and then just had every single slider and everything like that at 0. And I said, okay, if I'm going to make these and have what I would consider integrity in this process, I have to make them completely on my own, completely by myself. And so it took me a good 7-8 months of just figuring out, okay, I have to re-engineer without seeing it from somebody else or seeing something from the actual base presets that I had used before or whatever. I have to figure out exactly how to make those things work in that way so that if someone has a problem or an issue or whatever coming back, I can tell them, oh yeah, it's because of this, we need to change this. And so yeah, I like I said, I just zeroed out every single slider in Lightroom, all the curves, every single thing was just at 0, and then I made them from scratch so that I made sure I knew every single little bit of the process involved in making them.
That's awesome. And so that it's funny because I know there are people who are just taking other people's presets, turning 3 or 4 knobs and then selling this preset, which I do understand is kind of the same on some level. But at the end of the day, I think the integrity isn't there, but also if there was a problem, they couldn't help a person. But man, that's really fascinating. And it's I think with all this stuff from the very beginning, whether it be the way you chose to shoot and the types of weddings you went for, how you treat people, the speaking, the presets. Am I missing anything? You got anything else you're doing these days?
Yeah, I mean, I do my own workshops and speak at conferences and presets and.
What's next,
that's
Ben?
about it.
What are you most excited about these days? You like Jay mentioned, you've kind of I think most photographers are probably Benj, he like has done it all. He has his own presets. And he's on the Mount Olympus of like wedding photographers. Like, what is exciting you now, and rejuvenating your energy these days?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess I get asked that a lot too. But I feel like
dumb
the
question.
thing about it. No. It's a great question, because I think people assume like I'm gonna try to find a way to not make this sound pretentious or whatever, but you can get to a level of accolade or achievement or whatever, and then people just assume, okay, cool, like what's next? You've achieved it, but it's always like, what's next, right? But for me, it's like, no, I want to keep running this business. Photography and being a wedding photographer specifically is still at the core. It's still the bulk of my income. It's still the bulk of my time, all that stuff. So it's still me hustling for, gigs and leads and stuff like that. It's not like I'm just waiting for people to show up my door and pay me money to go to amazing places. I'm still like working at that in a really serious way. But also at the same time, I am trying not to be someone that's blind and oblivious to other opportunities that I might have in terms of, presets and other tools for photographers, or the demand for me to speak or teach at events and stuff like that. So I'm mainly at this point, this is the time that I know that you guys do stuff like this too, but I basically go through and audit all of my own personal workflows and what my revenue streams are and everything like that. To make sure that I'm essentially maximizing my time and all that good stuff. So yeah, I'm in a big season of doing that and figuring out, okay, what's next and all that stuff. Still knowing that like photography and that thing is still clearly the bulk of my mindset and all that kind of stuff. But I'm also the person that unfortunately can do a lot of things well-ish. So I have, I have like 2 seasons of a podcast completely planned out with like who I want to talk to about what and everything like that. I have, I think, like 60 different videos that I want to make between either like a Patreon or a YouTube channel. So that's my main thing, is I basically just need a producer to do all that stuff for me. But
yeah. Isn't that, I mean, there's just a type of person, and like, sometimes I feel like when we talk about our own business, I'll be like, this must seem weird to people, because I do know like there are types of people that are super high energy and they have all these ideas. And like when I look at wedding videography, I feel like I know nothing about it. I always am like, oh, I suck at this. I'm terrible at this. I need to keep working. Like I never feel like we're close to good. I know I feel confident that I can do it. But this idea of like, I couldn't imagine getting a place where we were like, what else are we going to do? Is what I mean. Like, I couldn't imagine that. Like, I would always be like, well, no, I need to improve at this. I need to get better at this. I need to do this and this. And I got this opportunity. Like, I feel like there is so much, like, having that kind of attitude about your business, I think is actually it's a strategy, actually. Which is like always keeping your eye on all the areas where you can improve, always keeping your eye on opportunities, never settling. Like, and not in the way that you're not grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, even in what you were saying and essentially repeating back that like you had things in the way you shoot and stuff like that you could identify with and know that you needed to improve on. I feel like a lot of people, and I've been in this situation too, where I felt like I've kind of like leveled out in terms of, shooting or whatever growth, because especially early on, growth is fast and furious, and you learn so much. Your drive and everything like that is just pushing you to do amazing things, but it can definitely level out at points. But being smart enough to go, okay, these are the areas that I'm actually like lacking in or whatever, and being able to identify those is super important and super healthy in terms of, trying to grow your craft at least.
Well, yeah. And it's like one of the reasons why we knew we were ready to do Huxley Film, which is like our more high end line, is because we were to the place with Stop Go Love where we could do it in our sleep.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, now we need a new challenge. Yeah. Like that. And now we need to try something new and different, and
that we suck at.
I feel, it's so hard.
Yeah.
And I think like introducing challenge into your own business is an important skill. Like finding ways to introduce challenges that will push you, and like you're going, I got to make a podcast. So that's a challenge. Oh, I got to
Yeah.
make these YouTube. Like you have to figure those things out. And then I'm sure you're going to find as you do that, that stuff will start to work backwards into your photography. Like,
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked about it earlier too, but I have like 4 of these like weird film cameras sitting on my desk right now. And I'm like probably the only person that you guys have ever come across that only shoots with Leica rangefinder cameras for their wedding photography. Probably literally, I might be the only person in the United States that solely uses those cameras, right? But it's also because I got to a place with my other DSLR cameras that they were just too easy. Like everything worked too good. And I needed like a challenge to make different images. And I feel like my images are better because I'm forced to be more creative by using that particular gear.
I heard
right?
Jack White talk about guitars, and he said he likes bad guitars because they make him play better.
Yeah.
He wants a guitar he has to fight with, he says.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like,
Well, I mean, that's a perfect analogy for how I have to focus my cameras. It's completely manual focus. I don't see through the lens. Everything about it makes me think and forces me to think and be critical about what I'm doing in that exact moment every single time I take a photo, instead of just being able to shoot from the hip or like put it up and just click a button and it automatically does everything for me.
yeah, that's awesome.
What do you think of that new Leica SL2? Have you seen that one? Yeah.
Yeah,
Too
no,
digitally?
I'm a super gear nerd. Yeah, so I've seen every camera that comes out and could tell you more about it than the people that actually shoot with it, I'm sure. Because
It would
I'm
make
weird
it
like
too
that.
easy for you.
It's cool. I mean, like any of that stuff, all this face tracking and eye detect and all that stuff is just like, it's amazing and I do want it, but there's something about like having a lack of technology that forces you to be the one to do that stuff. And if I was like, I used to shoot photos for the Seattle Seahawks. Sorry, Boston. Or I guess you're welcome, Boston, I guess.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for that
You're
one.
welcome. Yeah.
I was at that game.
But don't talk to me about it. But yeah, so I used to do that. And obviously I couldn't photograph that with a Leica very well in comparison to all these, other
But
cameras.
what about
But
your
at the same
purity,
time-
Benj?
But I was
sell
still
out.
photographing when I first started. I was photographing those games on the original Canon 5D, which had horrible autofocus.
Yes.
And so I had to really really like think and predetermine where I was going to be. And no, I was using
fired,
my own
Benj.
gear, so it was my own fault. But yeah, with anything like that, I mean, you're talking about presenting your own challenges and stuff like that and identifying those things. It also goes the same thing with your business. I feel like so many people have big issues with their business and they aren't paying enough attention to what those things are to be able to fix them because they can't identify the problem in the first place, right? So anything with that, finding the way to essentially, be able to identify those problems so you can fix them either creatively or in business or anything like that is insanely crucial.
Isn't that just, I always talk about weddings. This is my rant on wedding storytelling. I think that when videographers say that they're storytellers, I'm like, you're probably not. You're a documenter, but you're not telling a story because you're not crafting anything. Because like there are rules to stories. And stories have tension. That's how a story is good. You would never watch a movie that was man goes to has a really good morning, and then it gets better, and then it gets better, and then it gets better, and then it's the best.
He's considering not actually marrying her today.
Everything's no, you have to introduce
the drama.
Yeah, and so like
oh my
really,
gosh, the tension in that would be awful.
the really good
You're gonna be the
editors.
antagonist here. The weather.
Yes,
Yeah.
like really good editors will introduce tension. You'll see like kind of even horror elements and really interesting things. And so there are filmmakers who are excellent storytellers. And every once in a while you get a wedding with really good audio, like the audio is really strong and it gives you an arc. But in general, you're not necessarily telling a story so much as you're documenting something that's just happening. But like if you can find a way to introduce tension into it, then it becomes more interesting, even just visual tension, finding things like that. And I think the same thing happens with your business. Your business has to be a story. And if you don't have a story and you don't produce tension, this is me. I need this to be interested. Maybe everyone else doesn't need this, but I need to have a fight with my own business that I have to fight that I will get me up in the morning and give me the adrenaline to do what I need to do. And it's a great, great skill if you like not picking fights with people, not creating relationships that are stressful, not complaining or whining about your business, but finding a challenge that will make it feel like there's momentum to your story. Like, I don't know, do you play video games? You're not a video gamer at all?
No, I don't really play. I don't really play much video games. I do, but not a ton.
I remember like when I was a kid, I'd play a video game, and then you'd like an RPG or whatever. You'd get all the gold, all the weapons, level up, and you're like, I'm done with this game.
Yep.
You never want to play it again. You don't want to play things like that.
What is there to do now?
Yeah, and that like wrestling with your art and your business. That is what you're doing. You're not being successful is not that fun. Like there's a reward to it, but a lot of people, and they're in the middle of their business and they're actually supposed to be enjoying the thing that they're doing, the tension, the struggle. And instead they just can't wait to get on the other side of it. And I'm like, no, like lean into it, figure it out. Cause that's where you're going to grow. That's what's going to teach you is like that moment of tension that you have to struggle with will make you great. And it will make it fun. So we're going to end the podcast with a question, which I kind of prepped you on. So what is your favorite thing right now, Benj Haisch? What's just like, we do it every podcast with somebody and we get a range of answers. So.
Yeah. I mean, so we started the podcast with it. We're going to end with that for me. I recently got this. It's a Fujifilm Class W. It's a point and shoot film camera. It has a 28 millimeter lens. And it's my favorite thing. I carry it with me every single day. And it forces me to like, document my life well and all that stuff. But also it's a tiny little camera that has a ton of limitations to it. And so I'm always trying to take it and take photos of my kid and my life and stuff like that, but also make interesting stuff with it wherever I am. And so, it's a good kind of combo for me of being able to document my life well, but also always be having some sort of photography mindset. So I'm constantly sort of like sharpening my craft a little bit, if that makes sense.
So I've been experimenting with lens whacking. It's free lensing. Basically, you get a really small
lens whacking?
Yeah, that's what videographers call it.
Interesting. Okay.
Because basically you're hitting it against it the whole time.
That's really why they call it that?
Yeah, because like you use the distance to focus.
I thought it was because it looked wacky.
Why don't you guys just call it free lensing?
I don't know. I actually heard it lens whacking before free lensing.
Yikes. I don't like that.
You don't like whacking it?
No, that's where the connotation goes. Yeah. So that's
what they call it. But I've been experimenting with that just because there was some shots I was looking at in a wedding, and I was like, oh, this is so boring, but I need this shot. How do I introduce movement into this without adding movement? Like, because I want it to be static, but also have movement. Yeah. And so I've been messing around with that.
It's too bad it's like the hardest thing in the world to do on video.
You got to get the right lens. I don't have the right lens yet. Yeah. I think I want to look at some of the Nikons. A lot of people like those with the EF mounts, but so that's what I've been into.
Yeah. Mine is Resolve, DaVinci Resolve, which is always it's a color corrector, Benj, for you photographers out there.
Oh, I know. Like I said, I'm a nerd. I've never used it, but I know lots of things about it because I'm a nerd.
I've dove into it in years past and just like, this is not for me. Like I gotta get out of this. This is like, but it kind of goes to our conversation a little bit of like, I have no idea what we're doing. This stinks. And it's like, I watched a TED Talk recently and they were talking about like, it really only takes 20 hours to have that projection of like, now I know how to at least do a thing. Before I don't know how to even like touch, this and interface with this. It takes probably...
Which is actually kind of embarrassing for people who literally can't do anything. That it's like, you were not even willing to give 20 hours to this?
Yeah. But, I think I've put my 20 hours in Resolve and it's fine. Or in Resolve, and it's finally starting to pay off where I'm like, can actually do things, and it's really exciting me.
Isn't it weird how when you're using an NLE or editing software or any kind of technology, it's like you have to retrain your brain to think in that language.
Yeah.
that like whatever that
absolutely,
design
yeah.
language is. And like at first it's like infuriating. And then once you get it, then you're like anticipating it and you're using it when you're shooting.
Yeah.
Like,
oh,
it's
absolutely.
just
With anything. Even with like, this is so funny. I never play video games, but I only play them in the off season, sort of. And I
same.
went from playing Zelda Breath of the Wild to playing some other game, and the
Dude, I
controls
love it.
were all backwards. And so me trying to play this game for like the first probably 20 hours or whatever. I don't even know if I gave it that many hours, but it was just like every time I would come across something, I would just be smacking my head into the wall, just going like, why? Because my natural inclination is to do the exact opposite of this.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
It's crazy. And you know, it's funny. I don't know why I keep introducing, maybe I just like challenges. I'm a person I like challenges.
Yeah.
But
we're both ADD to the max. So
Elemental P.
yes,
Yeah.
easily bored. Hey, Benj, thank you so much for being on today. We really appreciate it.
I did want to ask you one more question, Benj. With
hit me.
With the Astros and Red Sox kind of their downward trajectory.
Yes.
How's your Seattle
Burn
team
it
look
to the
this year?
ground.
Are they gonna make it to the series
they're
this
gonna
year?
be
Or what?
terrible. No, not a chance. The Mariners are still rebuilding, so
Yeah.
yeah. No, the
Still?
Mariners had the longest playoff drought in North American sports. So any team, any league, they haven't been to the playoffs. Yeah, since I was
Is
almost
that
in high
true?
school.
Even
basically.
like the Browns, even like terrible teams
No, they've
like that, I
been
guess-
to the playoffs. They might not
Yeah.
have a playoff win, but they've been.
Okay.
We haven't been to the playoffs since 2004, I think, or something.
Yeah.
And
baseball
the
has,
NFL
like-
has more parity. We could do a
Yeah.
sports podcast.
baseball
Let's do
keeps
that.
baseball keeps inventing new ways to get into the playoffs, and they still can't do it.
Nope. Yeah, we've been a couple games away, and like we'll just blow it at the end. But yeah, the Mariners are not. They're developing. So
Does Felix
that'll be
Hernandez still
another fun
play
year.
for you?
No, he literally
He
just
retired.
signed.
Yeah.
No, he just signed with
He
the
signed?
Braves. Yep, with
Wow.
Atlanta. He has a 1 year, $1 million contract if he makes the 40 man.
I used to love Felix Hernandez.
Dude,
He
was amazing.
Felix Hernandez.
But
Now
he
it
didn't
makes me
innovate.
sad.
He kept trying to do what he'd always done. Here, this is a good way to end this. He kept trying to do what he'd always done. He didn't innovate his craft. He didn't do the things that he needed to do to be successful once that particular skill that he had went away. And then it failed him, and he went from like one of the best pitchers in the league to probably
garbage
maybe not making a roster. And he's
Yeah.
as old as I am.
Hit a
So,
cliff.
you know?
Yeah, he's bad. But I loved him. Hey, Benj, thank you so much for being on. We really appreciate
thank
you.
you, Benj.
Maybe we'll run into you at in WPPI.
Let us know when you start your
Yeah.
baseball podcast. We'd
Yeah.
love to be guests.
We will.
There we
We're
go.
actually in a
Don't
fantasy
give me
sports
I need.
league.
Yeah. I
With a
have
bunch of
too many
guys.
ideas. Don't give me another one.
Awesome, man.
All right, dude. Have an awesome day, man.
Cool. Thanks, guys. See ya.